Hey everyone, welcome to the first edition of Octagon Daddies. He's Dave, I'm Mike. We're excited to be here today. Dave, go ahead and cue the intro music.
Do 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 do
Good
do.
enough. We're still learning how to do that. All right. Well, today we're going to go ahead and just provide a little analysis, as well as give our picks for UFC Fight Night, Lewis versus Spivak. So let's just jump right into it. First early prelim of the night is Jesus Aguilar versus Tetsuro Taira. Dave, what do you think for this one?
I am really liking Tyra in this one. I love that he's got a 7.5 inch reach advantage. He's 3 inches taller. This kid is just a beast all around. A great striker. He's got really good takedown accuracy. If he gets you on the ground, he's going to submit you, or he's going to beat the hell out of you, and with a little bit of ground and pound. He's only seen the third round about 3 times in his career over those 12 wins. Whereas with Aguilar, he was on the Contender Series this past season. His big win was Arison Ferreira. He beat him with a guillotine. He does have 4 finishes of his 8 wins with that guillotine. 6 of the 8 have been by a finish as well. The big thing with him is he's a super low volume striker. He doesn't like to throw his hands a lot. He doesn't throw a lot of kicks. So for this one, I have actually Tyra winning by sub, probably fairly early.
Yeah, it's hard to argue against that. You mentioned Aguilar as the Contender Series alum, and this being his first UFC fight. That Contender Series fight, I think he was losing until that guillotine in the third round. So
Mm-hmm.
he almost didn't make it to the UFC for this fight.
Yeah.
And obviously now he draws Tetsuro Taira in his first fight. Yikes, that's just the worst matchup you can draw in the first fight.
Yeah.
Um, like you said, Taira has a really high finish rate. One, two fights in the UFC, one coming by finish, but was really successful in Japan on the Shuto scene as well.
Yeah.
Like you said, Taira, really well-rounded game, mixes his strikes with his grappling really well. And the key, I think, and you kind of touched on it too, Aguilar is not really like a high volume guy. Taira has a super high work rate. So, combine everything. I just think he's the much better fighter in general. I think current money line for this one is minus 1,500. It's
Yeah.
absolutely insane. I agree with it. I just don't see any chance for Aguilar. Taira takes it any way he wants, really. So, yeah, that's it for that one. Next fight on the early prelims, Jun Park versus Dennis Tialulin. And I'll lead off for this one. The Iron Turtle, great nickname. He has the experience edge here, and he's notched a few UFC wins against some pretty solid fighters. Tialulin, he goes out there, he throws with a really high volume, but he
Mm-hmm.
also eats a ton of shots. I think he eats almost like 7 significant shots a minute. The Iron Turtle's a small favorite here. Ultimately, I think there's more paths to victory for Park because he does mix in takedowns and grappling as opposed to Tyler Lulin, who likes to just strike. So I'm just going to go with Park in this one. How do you see it playing out?
I agree with you completely. I have the Park money line on this one. Even though he is just a slight favorite. I do think that Tuolulin does have the ability to win this fight. And if he does, it is going to be by points just because he has a huge reach advantage. He's got 4 inches in a reach and 5 inches in height. He's got super heavy hands too. And Park is, I don't want to say he's susceptible to a KO, but this Russian he's a big puncher. I think he can probably knock him back a little bit. I sound like I'm trying to convince myself into going with Tuolulin, but I'm going to stick with the Park money line. You touched on everything I was probably going to go down the line with. I guess the big thing for me is the experience Tuolulin had in Pride, because there's some big time fighters over there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could see I've got Park, but I wouldn't be surprised if Tylulin knocks him back into his shell, because it's happened before. Park's been knocked
Yeah.
out before. That being
Yeah.
said, we're both going with Park here. All right. Next fight is going to be Ji Yeon Kim versus Mandy Bohm. Dave, you're going to lead off on this one again.
So for this one, they both have some pretty solid nicknames. Kim being Fire Fist, Bone being Monster, but I don't think they fit their personalities at all in the octagon. They are both insanely low volume strikers. Bone probably has the better hands. Definitely a little bit more power, I would think. Whereas Kim has not really done anything since she's gotten into the UFC. For this one, I would struggle picking a winner. I'd probably go Bohm, just because I do think she is the better striker and she's got a pretty good takedown defense. But this would be my best bet of the night. Would be taking this fight over 2.5 rounds. It is minus 390. So I would probably loop it in with a parlay, just so you get your money's worth on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would be shocked if there were a finish in this fight, if it didn't go the distance. But we might disagree on who's going to win this fight. So both of these fighters, both struggling coming into this, both on losing streaks. So solid matchmaking by the UFC there. Like you said, they both prefer to stand and strike. Bohm does have a little bit of a higher work rate. To borrow one of your terms that you like to use, we could be in for a tickle fight here. I don't know that it's going to be a very exciting fight. I'm going to go with Kim, actually. I think she's got the better gas tank, and I think she's going to finish a little bit stronger, and I think that's what's going to earn her the victory in this one.
Okay, I can get behind that. And I do have that noted here. It's one of my last notes on Kim is she does have a little bit more power, and that could end up being the deciding factor. It could keep Bohm at a distance so she doesn't try to close, keep her scared just enough that she gets beat by points.
Yeah, close fight, tough one to pick either way. But next one up on the slate is going to be Sunguk Choi versus Hyunsung Park, and I'll lead off on this one. This is actually kind of exciting. This is the first Road to UFC tournament finale fight of the night, and this one's coming at the flyweight division. So both fighters coming in, riding some pretty big win streaks, but both have different methods of victory. So Choi has won most of his fights by decision. He's more of a grinder. He is really tough in there. Park is a bona fide finisher. So I love it. Completely different styles. I have some concern if this one does go to a decision, but ultimately I'm going to side with Park here, because he's displayed the ability to finish fights both through his grappling and striking. So that tells me that he's strong in both. So I'm leaning towards Park to get the win here.
I agree with you completely on this one. I have Park by decision as well. He does have the reach advantage. It's only 2 inches, an inch in height, which is going to play big for him. Choi likes to keep the fights at a distance. The majority of his fights, all of his strikes are done from distance. He's not a big clinch guy. He likes to use the legs a lot. He likes to chop the tree. But I don't think it's going to work this time, just because there is that reach difference that is not in his favor. Park, on the other hand, is an above average fighter when it comes to getting people down on the ground. His takedown, he gets 4.2 takedowns per fight, which is well above the UFC average. And he's a big finisher. He does have one professional loss in fighting. It wasn't kickboxing. It was his first career professional kickboxing fight. He lost. He doesn't really get taken down. And I think a lot of that has to do with the kickboxing background. He knows how to throw the kicks. He doesn't get caught with a single leg going up. If he can keep this fight on the feet and not get taken down, I think he will touch Choi all night, and it won't even be close. It'll be a unanimous decision, 30-27.
Fair enough. We're on the same side there. All right, next fight, we've got 2 Japanese fighters going at it, Toshiomi Kazama and Rinya Nakamura. Who do you got in this one?
This one I have Nakamura. I absolutely love this kid. He he's stealing the nickname from Nico Price, the hybrid. Um, but he is the definition of hybrid in this game. The being at the bantamweight, he has massive KO power. This guy can knock anybody out, kind of like how Derek Lewis was a few years back. Um, of his 6 wins, 5 of them are finishes for TKOs. He does have one submission with a key lock crank, which is absolutely insane. Think of like a Kimura, but you're twisting the shoulder lock back towards the head. He also averages 5.5 takedowns a fight as well, and doesn't get taken down on his own. He's only gone the distance once, whereas Kazama, obviously, he has a pretty solid record at 10-2, but he's a lower volume puncher, especially when standing face to face. If he gets into the clinch, he tends to throw a little bit more. He's a good dirty boxer. He's pretty dangerous on the ground as well. He's got 5 subs, 3 ground and pound finishes over his 10 wins. And he actually came up through the road to the UFC as well. The last fight he did have, I don't have noted down who it was against, but there was next to no action. He essentially won by default. He just outlanded. So Nakamura is the highlight reel guy. I think he's the guy we start to see climb the ranks pretty quickly here in the UFC. I have him by TKO.
Yeah, and nothing against Kazama. He's looked really solid in the road to UFC tournament, but Nakamura is just a different animal. And I love it that, when you think Japanese martial arts, you typically think about guys with like strong karate or judo backgrounds, but Nakamura has that championship level freestyle wrestling background. So I'm loving that. I think he just brings so much to the table for this one. So yeah, I've got Nakamura just ragdolling Kazama all over the octagon in this one.
Yeah.
He's also going to win it basically however he wants. So we agree on that one. All right. Next fight is John Young Lee versus Yi Za. And I'll start off with this in here. So Lee's currently riding a 6 fight winning streak. He took care of his last two opponents, within 2 minutes. So he's making quick work of his opponents in the octagon. Yi is 21-3 as a pro, which is also pretty impressive. And Yi has shown the ability to win in a number of different ways. Lee is a pretty decent favorite in this one, but honestly, I think that hot streak is going to come to an end here. I think Lee's going to drop this one. I've actually got Yi because of the experience. I think that's just going to play a big factor in this particular fight. I think Yi Za's experience is going to be enough for him to get the upset by decision.
Oh, okay. I like that a lot. And I like what you touched on, the 6 fight win streak. That is really big for Zhang Li. 7 of his 9 wins have been by finish. He's got super heavy hands for a featherweight. He loves to keep the fight on his feet, but I agree with you with Yi Zha on this. I do think he's going to win this one. But I actually like him by submission. He has 7 of his last 10 wins have been stoppages. 5 have been subs. And he loves to take the fight to the ground. He averages 7.85 takedowns per fight. And he's hitting it like 75% accuracy. He's average on the feet. He doesn't throw a lot of kicks. He's not a big puncher. But if he can get this fight to the ground, I think he ends it quickly.
Awesome. Well, we both have the upset on that fight. So moving on to another fight that's actually odds-wise pretty close. We've got Jika Saragi versus Anshul Jubli. What do you see for this one?
For this one, I like Saragi a lot. He does have a height advantage. He did fight in One Pride, which gives him a pretty solid pedigree. That 13-2 record really holds its weight. He's fought some solid competition. He's a little bit smaller. He's 3 inches smaller. There is no reach disadvantage in this one, though. They're both coming in at 69 inches. He's on a 5 fight win streak. He's got a 91% finish rate. This kid does nothing but knock people out. As for Jubilee, he is undefeated. 4 of his wins are by decision. Um, his last fight in Road to the UFC, I saw some highlights of it, but purely from a stat perspective, he was taken down 4 times and outlanded. I don't believe he won the fight. He probably shouldn't even be in this matchup. So based on that alone, as well as Saragi's ability to give it to pretty much everybody he's fought, I have Saragi by TKO.
Yeah, I think we're right in step, you and I, with this one as well. I mean, admittedly, I'm a sucker for flashy fighters. Saragi is that. He takes
Yeah.
pride in his flashiness. I love it. And like you mentioned, not to be redundant, but Jubilee, his first win in the tournament was a walkover. He didn't even fight. And then his second fight was a close split decision that a lot of people thought his opponent won the fight. So I was a little surprised to see Jubilee as the slight favorite in this one.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe I'm missing something, but give me Saragi in this fight as well. So I think we're
Yes.
together there. All right, moving on to the next fight. We've got Yusaku Kinoshita versus Adam Fugget. And I'll start with this one here. So Kinoshita, really young, 22 years old, earned his spot on the roster via third round knockout on the Contender Series. Now, Fugget, he drew an extremely tough first UFC fight in Michael Morales, who
Yeah.
I think is going to be fantastic. It's just a wonderful, unbelievable prospect. He was knocked out in the third round in that fight, but I'm not really holding that against him because I think Morales is that good. That being said, I just think Kinoshita is way too athletic and explosive for him. I think he's going to be overwhelmed. It's hard to see this one going the distance for me. Kinoshita, I think, is just a cut above everywhere. Striking, grappling, you name it. Give me Kinoshita in this one.
Okay. I can see where you're going with that. I actually have Fugit by decision. I do think that loss to Morales, like you said, is more or less like a fluke for him. This kid can throw his hands, and he's able to keep the fight on its feet. And if he's able to keep the fight on its feet, I think he can strike with Kinoshita the entire time. He's got almost a 6-inch reach advantage, which can play a huge amount in his favor because they're only an inch different in height. So he's an inch taller, 5.5 inches longer in the arms. The only thing that concerns me is all 3 of his losses have been by stoppages, but 7 of his 8 wins are by stoppages as well. He can finish on the ground. He can knock you out. At this point, I think the high volume striker who can keep it on his feet will probably play a little bit better in his favor. He should be able to touch him from a distance, maybe rattle him a time or two, get it up against the cage, do some dirty boxing. I like Fuga by decision.
All right, fair enough. Fugit is probably easier to say with a straight face than Fugit, so maybe I should have considered that.
That's why I went with Fuga.
Moving on. Here's an exciting matchup. Doo-Ho Choi, the Korean Superboy versus Kyle Nelson. What are you seeing in this fight?
This one is a tough one. They're both on a 3-fight losing, or I'm sorry, Choi's on a 3-fight losing streak. Nelson himself is 1-4 in the UFC. Choi has been very inactive though. He's been around since 2014. He's only fought 6 times. Last 2 losses were by TKO, but they were to Charles Jourdain and Jeremy Stevens. 2 big time strikers in the UFC, especially Stevens. Stevens has power for days. He did lose a decision to Cub, which I didn't see the fight, so I don't want to really speak on it, but it was during Cub's downslide. So I don't know what it says about Doo-Ho Choi, but he does have pretty solid hands. I think he has a weak chin. I do notice though he does have some KO power. The KO power was kind of there against some lower level talent. I don't know if Nelson is that much of a lower level talent than his stats say he is. He does struggle a lot with some strong hand fighters, and that is who Nelson is. He's got above average power. He starts fast. He tries to get you out quick. If he doesn't get you out, he usually fades and he loses a decision. So for this one, I have Nelson by TKO.
Okay. Wow. This one, another good matchmaking job by the UFC. Both of these guys coming off some losses. Like you mentioned, though, Choi hasn't been that active. His last fight, I think, coming in late December 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at those fights and I look at the losses, he did lose to some big names. Jeremy Stevens, Cub Swanson. I know that those two guys were kind of starting their downtrend around that time, but still they weren't kind of where they're at now. So I think Choi's got better losses than Nelson. He's got stronger opponents that he's faced.
Yeah.
So to me, kind of a close fight, but I'm gonna go with Choi. Both guys are gonna look to strike here. I think Choi's just a little bit more dangerous. So yeah, I've got Korean Superboy getting back in the win column on this one.
Nice. Okay.
All right. And now getting down to the last few fights here, we got Marcin Tybura versus Blagoy Ivanov. And I'll tell you, my thoughts on this one is when I first look at the fight on the surface, and even when I look at the money line on this, with Tybura being the favorite, my first instinct is like, oh yeah, Tybura. But then not even looking anything up, but just thinking back on pretty much all of Ivanov's fights, I feel like number one, he's fought great opponents, but I
Yeah.
think almost every single loss of his has been close. Like he's always so close that he probably has multiple split decision losses. So the more I think about it, the more I start to lean Ivanov. Um, I will point out that Tybura has a win from 4 or 5 years ago against one of our headliners tonight, Sergey Spivak. So obviously
Mhm.
that's pretty impressive. I just think Ivanov is just a really tough out. He doesn't throw a lot out there. He's super technical. He knows how to stay in the fight. I think he's finally going to come out on the right side of a decision here. So I've got Ivanov winning this fight.
Ooh, okay. That's kind of a surprise. I figured we were going to be on the same page on this one. I do have Tybura winning it. Um, and a lot of it has to do with his size. Like he is just purely a massive human being when it comes to being in the octagon. Not that Ivanov is small. He's plenty big himself, but he's got a 5-inch reach, 6-inch height advantage. Um, he's 6-1 since 2020. 4 were by decision, though. The one thing that does concern me, he did fight uh, Alexander Romanov last, and he got a majority decision win that I don't think he won. He was taken down, outlanded. He was in trouble in the first. He probably lucked out that he survived. He does have a strong chin, but he's a slow starter. If he can overcome Ivanov in that first round and work his way up into the fight in the second round, I think he has a chance to win by decision. I don't see it really going any other way for him. I don't think he can knock out Ivanov. And as you touched on with Ivanov, he's got some really solid losses. And he gave our headliner tonight all he could handle at UFC 244. That was not a lopsided fight at all. Those guys pounded on each other. He's got a strong chin. He's a good striker. He doesn't get taken down much. But I do think Tybura is going to be able to touch him a little bit more. I think he's going to chop at his legs some and point him to death.
Okay. All right. Well, there we go. Moving on to the co-main event, we've got Dawoon Jung versus Devin Clark. Give me your thoughts on this one.
I think this one's going to be very lopsided. I think Clark is probably fighting for his contract at this point. If he doesn't win or at least put up a solid showing against Jung, he's probably going to get dropped. They both have pretty solid wins over William Knight. The big notable thing, though, for me is Jung's win over Nichekwu. That was he purely dominated him in my eyes. He's 4-1-1 in the UFC. He's got 3 stoppages. He did lose to Daniel Jacoby, but kind of think that may have been a fluke decision loss. It was a little bit earlier in his UFC career. He's got solid power, whereas Clark, he's got average power, but he gasses out quickly. If Jung can get this to the ground, Clark's horrible off of his back. He's easy to take down. I think he beats on him for a little bit and then ends up taking his back when Clark tries to get up and gets a choke in for the win. But I do have a fun fact on this one. Jung beat a guy named Hulk in 2017, which I just thought was amusing.
Yeah, I've never heard of the guy, I don't think. So he must not be really very Hulk-like. But yeah. Devin Clark, you were talking about nicknames. I like Devin Clark's nickname, the Brown Bear. I think
do.
from like South Dakota, maybe, and he's like into to hunting in the outdoors and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, for this fight, I've actually waffled on this one. I know you were pretty definitive about taking Jung. I'll tell you why. So Jung, big, powerful striker, kind of lets his technique kind of go sideways often though. He does have a decided advantage on the feet against Devin Clark, no doubt about it. What kind of worries me a little is Clark. I think he's pretty self-aware as a fighter. And I think he knows that his pretty much only path to victory is just trying to like smother Jung. And you've seen him try to take that path before against other guys where he's just like, pushing guys up against the cage, getting takedowns, really amassing control time with not a lot being done. So that's my only concern about the fight is that he'll try to do that and maybe make it closer than it should be. That being said, Jung is hard to take down. I think he's got an 88% takedown defense rate, which is great. So not super confident, but give me Jung as well on this one.
Okay.
All right. Now for the main event of the evening, we've got everyone's favorite Derek Lewis versus Sergey Spivak. I'll lead off on this one, I guess. I love the Black Beast like everybody else. So what I'm about to say hurts a little bit. I just don't think this is a great matchup for him.
I agree.
Look, he's absolutely capable of rocking Spivak, and that wouldn't surprise me at all. I think Spivak is going to be pretty conservative, at least early, like most people are against Lewis. But I think he'll go for a good amount of takedowns. We know that Lewis has below average cardio. I mean, I've seen some photos going around lately of Derek Lewis, and he honestly looks to be in the best shape of his fighting career. But I got to see it to believe it, honestly, in terms of cardio and the gas tank. So sadly, I think Spivak is just going to kind of wear him out. So I'd love to see Lewis win by KO, but unfortunately, I've got Spivak taking this one by submission.
Okay, I can completely see that, and we're kind of on the same line here. The big thing for me on this is Lewis's last win was against Dawkins. Now, granted, he was climbing the ladder pretty solidly and got up to the Black Beast and was kind of showing what the top level of the UFC heavyweight division looks like. Spivak, on the other hand, surprisingly beat Tai Tuivasa back in 2019. He's also had some pretty solid wins on his 2-fight win streak. He beat August Sakai and Greg Hardy, which at this point, everybody seems like they beat on Greg Hardy. He did lose to Tom Aspinall, though. And that's a little bit of a concern. I don't think Aspinall is that great of a heavyweight. He's pretty solid, but he's not a huge striker. Whereas Derek Lewis is. He may not throw a ton of punches, but the ones he throws have meaning. As for that, Spivak is a takedown artist. This man can take anybody down. And Derek Lewis does not really know how to defend the takedown. He's improved over the last couple years, but he's really not where he needs to be for this fight. And what I think ends up happening is Spivak gets him to the ground sometime in the middle of the second round when Lewis starts to gas a little bit and hits him with a couple elbows and then ends up getting the TKO with some ground and pound.
All right. Yeah. I think everybody, well, not everybody, especially if you got money on the line, but I think a lot of people want to see Derek Lewis win. Haven't seen a lot of great things lately. It's going to be a tough fight for him. Either way, this fight night card, a lot of fighters that most people don't know about simply because they're just most of them are Asian bound fighters. They do most of their fighting in Asia.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to have a lot of these guys be introduced stateside here in the UFC. Reminder to everybody that is watching: it's a little bit of a late start time for those in the US to accommodate for the Asian market. But that's about it for our analysis. One final thing before we go here, Dave, do you have any best bets for the weekend upcoming?
So I do have the best bet. As I said earlier, we have Kim Bomb over 2.5 rounds. I had that at minus 390. But I also do have a parlay that I did put a unit on, and that's the Kim Bomb over 2.5 at minus 390. Nakamura by TKO, KO, or DQ. I did get that at plus 100. I do think it's not going to happen in the first round. If you want to get a little froggy with it, you can get it in the second round at plus 475, which I think has solid money on its own to throw maybe a half a unit on it at plus 475. And then as well, I have Saragi just to win the fight in no specific manner. And that was at plus 100 as well for a 3-fight parlay to get us at plus 402.
All right, not bad, not bad. I don't really have much action in terms of bets that I love for this fight night. Probably a small play on a parlay with Taira, Nakamura, and Kinoshita. Maybe that's probably my only bet of the night. It's not going to pay a ton, but that's it. That's it. We appreciate everybody being here, listening to our picks. We look forward to having plenty more podcasts and episodes coming out with reactions to fights, picks, analysis, and maybe touch on a little DraftKings UFC Rainmakers as well. So that's it, everybody. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next time.
Yeah, thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.